Hello, welcome to Storytime with Tamarin. It's been more of a grey day here today, a very typical cold January grey day. How do we get through those days? I have managed to go outside for a walk, which I was really glad about. I listened to a podcast and did my walk, and then I watched a lot of cartoons. I watched a lot of Big Mouth, and sometimes I find, if I'm feeling a bit down, that cartoons help me. I can just switch off. And now I am listening to some very hypnotic, weird sort of solfeggio type music. Kind of hippie frequency music stuff to lull me into relaxation. Yeah, felt a bit down today. It switches up, doesn't it? Sometimes you feel good, sometimes you don't, and I'm all right. And I'm glad to be feeling very well and ready for story time. Hope you're all well. Now, yes, so we're reading Girl, Woman, Other. It's a lovely, lovely book. You can jump in at any point. And today we are jumping on to Dominique, who is Amma's friend, who is Yaz's mum. We've just been hearing about Yaz's world. And now we're going to find out a bit more about Dominique. So here we go. This is the third part of chapter 1. Dominique. Dominique came across Nazinga at Victoria Station in the rush hour as she was being knocked down by the steamrollering effect of London's ruthless commuters determined to catch their trains at all costs. Her bag fell open and everything fell out. Passport, A to Z, rough guide to London, hemp purse, tampons, Zenith E camera, Palmer's hand cream, evil eye charm, ivory-handled hunting knife. Nazinga was profusely grateful when a passing Dominique approached to help, the pair of them scrambling about on the station floor gathering up her belongings. When that was done, and Nazinga once more was upright and composed, Dominique found herself in front of an extraordinary vision. The woman was statuesque. Her skin glowed, her robes flowed, her features were sculptural, lips fulsome, thin ropes of dreadlocks fell freely down to her hips, silver amulets and bright beads sewn into them. Dominique had never seen anyone like her before. Offered to buy her coffee, confident she'd say yes because lesbians, and she suspected this one was, usually did. They sat opposite each other in the station cafe as Nazinga sipped on a glass of hot water with a slice of lemon in it, the only hot drink she allowed to pass her lips, she said. I don't abuse my body. Meanwhile, Dominique, drinking a cup of granulated coffee into which she dissolved 2 sugars and was dunking a succession of digestive biscuits, a packet of Maltesers at the side for dessert, felt guilty about the rubbish she was unthinkingly putting into her body, abusing it. Yes, abusing it. She'd never met an African-American before, and Nazinga's accent evoked the sensory delights of warm cornbread, sticky ribs, gumbo, jambalaya, collard greens, cracklin, fried cabbage, peanut brittle, and other foods she'd read about in novels by African-American women. Nazinga was visiting England for the first time since leaving as a small child, on her way back from a pilgrimage to Ghana, where she'd spent 2 weeks. It was her first time in the motherland, visiting Elmina Castle, where captured Africans had been incarcerated before being shipped to the Americas as slaves. The guide led them into a dungeon, shut the door. In the hot, suffocating darkness, he graphically described how up to 1,000 people were crammed into a space meant for 200, with no facilities or sanitation and little food or water for up to 3 months. In that moment, all the painful history of 400 years of slavery entered my body in a way it hadn't before, and I broke down and sobbed, Dominique. I sobbed and realised more than ever that the white man has a lot to answer for. Dominique stopped herself, replying that the African man had also sold Africans into slavery, so it was a lot more complex than that. Nazinga was a builder of timber houses on women's lands in the disunited states of America, where she'd lived since she was 5, and her mother, tiring of Nazinga's father, who flitted between various women in England and the Caribbean, fell for a handsome ex-forces man via correspondence. She was only 22 when she stupidly moved Nazinga and her brother, Andy, from their flat in Luton into what turned out to be a mobile home in a trailer park in Texas, where she and her brother slept on the floor by the kitchenette, while her mother and the man shared the pull-down double bed and had loud sex a few feet away from them. He drank hooch from the minute he woke up to just before he fell into a drunken and drugged stupor at night, picking up odd jobs here and there. Her mother found work in a chicken factory, was idiotically convinced she could cure him of his addictions and make a life for her children with him. Her futile attempts to curtail his addictions resulted in being beaten up so often she gave up trying to change him and fell into the drug life herself. What began badly became worse as Nazinga found herself being badly raised by 2 junkies whose priority was not her and her brother. Eventually, the inevitable happened when she reached puberty. There had been earlier signs, inappropriate touching and comments she'd been too young to decipher, and later, too vulnerable to ward off. She had her virginity stolen while her mother and brother were out shopping, and she'd stayed in to do her homework. The next morning, she managed to tell a teacher at school after she'd burst into tears, a man, as it happens, who'd always told her she was a clever child, practically the only good man she's ever known. A social worker was assigned. She and her brother were fostered out to a family who cared for them but did not love them, not deeply, not unconditionally. Andy went into the army at 16 and turned his back on the sister who turned him into a bulldyke, as he called her when he discovered her in bed with her girlfriend. Luckily, I really was bright and worked hard to get into the recently desegregated University of Texas at Austin instead of the local community college. Upon graduation, I set off to live in a women's commune to get away from people like my brother and the beast. When my mother died from an overdose, my brother and I didn't talk at the funeral, or since. Dominique sat there listening to the extraordinary vision before her, a woman who'd risen above the tragedy of her terrible childhood to become so magnificent, who exuded such warmth and experience. People saw Dominique as tough and self-sufficient, yet compared to Nazinga, she wasn't. Nazinga was powerful, unconquerable. Her presence and energy dominated the cafe. Her voice suffused a grey Monday afternoon with an exotic, sensual drawl. She was a Zami, a sexy sister, an inspiration, a phenomenon. Dominique wanted to curl into this woman and be looked after by her. It was a new feeling because she'd been fully independent since leaving home, and here she was, feeling what? Excited? Definitely, perhaps, falling in love with a complete stranger. I think you might be right, Dominique replied later that day as they sat in Crank's Whole Food restaurant in Leicester Square after Nazinga had suggested her relationship history of blonde girlfriends might be a sign of self-loathing. You have to ask yourself if you've been brainwashed by the white beauty ideal, sister. You have to work a lot harder on your black feminist politics, you know? Dominique wondered if she had a point. Why did she go for stereotypical blondes? Amma had teased her about it without judging her. She herself was a product of various mixtures and often had partners of all colours. In contrast, Nazinga had grown up in the segregated South, although shouldn't that make her pro-integration rather than against it? Dominique wondered if she really was still being brainwashed by white society, and whether she really was failing at the identity she most cherished, the black feminist one. She decided that Nazinga was a fairy angel sent to help her become a better version of herself. She became Nazinga's personal guide around the city, keen to show off how well she knew its history and hotspots, hopping on and off buses, taking shortcuts through the labyrinthine tunnels of the underground, slipping down ancient alleyways in the city's oldest parts, showing her the remnants of the Roman wall from nearly 2,000 years ago, taking her on the pebbly Thames beaches when the tide was out, where mudlarkers trawled for buried archaeological relics, through the numerous parks, greens, public gardens and wilder commons, on canal walks that lasted hours from Little Venice to the marshes of Walthamstow, on river cruises to Greenwich and Kew. At night, they slipped into tucked-away women's clubs, where they made out in darkened corners. They slept together the day they met and every night thereafter. It's so sublime, it's spiritual. Dominique raved at Amma when she turned up for work a fortnight later to a desk full of incomplete tasks. I've fallen in love properly for the first time in my life with the most wonderful woman I've ever met, who desires me from a position of inner strength, Amma. And it might sound odd, but that's so new to me and darn sexy, like she can rip my clothes off whenever she wants to, which she does. And I feel helpless and dominated, which I like. Whereas my previous lovers desired me from a position of weakness, of adoration, which just isn't interesting to me anymore. The tension between us is electrostatic, Ams. It's like I'm being charged up with electric volts. We can't bear to be apart, not even for 5 minutes. Nazinga is so wise and knowledgeable about how to be a liberated black woman in an oppressive white world that she's opening my eyes to, well, everything. It's like she's Alice and Audrey and Angela and Aretha rolled into one, seriously, Ams. Amma replied that this Nazinga must be something else to turn the coolest dyke of us all into a love-struck teenager. So when do I get to meet Alice, Audrey, Angela, Aretha? What's her real name, by the way? Cindy, if you must know. Don't ever tell her I told you. Dominique agreed to bring her to lunch at the King's Cross Squat, on Nazinga's strict proviso that only women of colour were invited, and the food had to be completely vegan, organic and fresh, or she couldn't be in the same room as it. That's the end of the first part. Yes, okay. Part 2. Nazinga really did look spectacular when she walked in the door of Amma's room in Freedomia. She was at least 6 foot tall with ornamented dreadlocks, large wooden Acuba fertility doll earrings, red trousers, a cream-embroidered caftan and strappy Roman sandals. She was somewhat older than them, yet somehow appeared ageless. Amma noted how the force of her presence had the effect of diminishing everyone else's. Before she arrived, her guests wanted to like Nazinga because they liked Dominique. Now she was here, they wanted to impress her. Amma wanted Nazinga to prove herself worthy of Dominique's love. Nazinga sat cross-legged in the circle of women on the floor where the meal was to take place. Amma found the idea of a dining table too suburban. Vegetable casserole with sweet potato, salads and brown loaves was spread out before them on a plastic tablecloth. Everything was from the budget supermarket. Nothing was organic or fresh. Who could tell once vegetables were cooked or chopped? And how dare Nazinga demand everyone eat according to her preferences? The conversation was lively. Everybody wanted to talk to Nazinga, who'd been afforded a gravitas she hadn't earned, Amma thought, simply by looking like a swamp diva voodoo queen. Nazinga lapped up the attention, was friendly, magnanimous with everyone, until she ruined it by exclaiming, somewhat scornfully, how weird it was to hear so many black women sounding so British. Amma thought she was accusing them of being too white, or at best, inauthentically black. She'd come across it before, foreigners equating an English accent with whiteness. She always felt the need to speak up when it was implied that black Brits were inferior to African Americans or Africans or West Indians. In any case, it might explain why Dominique had adopted an American lilt in the short period of time she'd been with Nazinga. Oh, Dominique. That's because we are, Amma replied, British. All of us are, right? Yet she was instinctively aware that to challenge Nazinga wasn't wise. Nazinga didn't miss a beat in replying that black women need to identify racism wherever we find it, especially our own internalised racism. When we're filled with such a deep self-loathing, we turn against our own. It struck Amma that this woman could be a formidable opponent. The energy that had hitherto radiated warmth had quickly turned radioactive. Dominique, usually an opinionated loudmouth, was oblivious to the bilateral tensions in the room, two alpha females about to go nuclear. She sat purring at her beloved's side. "We have to be vigilant," Nazinga said to the gathered women who seemed hypnotised by her. "We must be careful who we allow into our lives," she said, now staring at Amma with open hostility. "There are women among us who have been sent to destroy us. Internalised racism is everywhere, my friends." Her friends. "We have to be vigilant about everything and everyone." Point made. She then proceeded to ignore Amma. "We have to be vigilant with our language too," she continued. "Have you noticed that the word black, for example, always has negative connotations?" Heads nodded, to Amma's dismay. What was the matter with them? Nazinga then launched into the racial implications of stepping on a black doormat rather than over it, of not wearing black socks. Why would you step on your own people? "And don't ever use black garbage bags," she instructed. "As for blackmail, black ball, black mood, black magic, black sheep, black-hearted, I never wear black underpants, for example. Why crap on myself? I'm surprised you all don't know this already." There were more nods. Amma kept flashing Dominique looks. Is she serious? Are you serious? Except Dominique was too preoccupied lapping up this codswallop. Amma had had enough. She alone would have to deal with this woman, seeing as everyone else's brains had turned to mush. "That's not a problem for me," she said, "because guess what? I've not crapped my pants since I stopped wearing nappies as a kid." There was a detectable ripple of suppressed laughter in the room. Great! She was breaking Nazinga's spell, who was livid. "This is no time for cheap jokes, Amma. I think you need to listen to Bob Marley's Redemption Song and emancipate yourself from mental slavery." Amma considered thanking Nazinga for informing her she was mentally enslaved and told her that African peoples were referred to as black long after the word made its appearance in the English language, so it makes no sense to retroactively impose racist connotations onto its everyday usage. And if you do, you're going to drive yourself mad, and I'm sorry to say, everyone else with you. I'm surprised you don't know this already. It took Nazinga under a minute to make her excuses, Dominique in tow. Amma was pleased to see the back of the awful Cindy. The old Dominique would have done the same in her position. The new Dominique had become gullible to every piece of shit the voodoo queen spouted. How on earth had this happened? Amma hoped the Nazinga phase would end when the woman returned to America. She was returning to America, wasn't she? At the end of their summer of love, Dominique, cowardly, told Amma on the phone she'd been issued with an ultimatum by Nazinga. Either she goes to the US with her, or we go our separate ways. I don't do long distance, darling. Amma told her she was crazy. Don't go with that woman, Dominique, don't go. But having found real love, Dominique followed it to America. Who's there? Charlene Anchor, hello. Hello, everyone. Cool. All right, we push on to part 3 of Dominique's story. Nazinga was a teetotal, vegan, non-smoking, radical feminist, separatist, lesbian housebuilder, living and working on women's land all over America before moving on, a gypsy housebuilder. Dominique was a drinking, drug-dabbling, chain-smoking, lesbian, feminist, carnivorous clubber who produced theatre by women and lived in a London flat. She soon became a teetotal, vegan, non-smoking, radical feminist, lesbian housebuilder on women's land called Spirit Moon, which only allowed lesbians to reside there. Other females could visit, adult males and boys over 10 could not. Their job was to help build affordable houses in order to tempt young women to revitalise an ageing community. The rural setting of Spirit Moon, with its endless space and vistas, was invigorating to Dominique compared to the polluted air, dirty streets, frenzied atmosphere, and hard edges of London, where life happened at such a fast pace she'd been swept up into its masculine, as Nazinga pointed out, metropolitan maelstrom ever since first arriving from Bristol. The two of them were allocated a log cabin at the furthest reaches of the estate, an idyllically isolated corner where they could snuggle away from the world and toast crumpets over an open hearth. In front of them were fields. Behind was a beech, birch and maple forest. That first night, Dominique was too excited to sleep. She went to sit on the veranda in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the countryside. How could Amma have wanted to deny her this experience? Was it jealousy, as Nazinga suspected, saying that as she'd usurped Amma as the most important person in Dominique's life, Amma couldn't handle it? It was true that she and Amma had been soulmates without the sex, and now Nazinga was her soulmate, a total one-off goddess. Why couldn't Amma see that? And her rudeness at the dinner was unforgivable. How could she have twisted Nazinga's words when she was only trying to help everyone understand how racism worked? Nazinga was a good person with a big heart, who'd landed in Dominique's life when she was in between lovers and ready for something different. And just as she was tiring of running a theatre company where she spent too much time on the conveyor belt of writing grant applications with a measly 10% return, Amma hadn't really taken on board her complaints about this, had always reminded her what a great team they were. Dom, look at what we've achieved. Yes, but deep down, Dominique had wanted something new, an adventure, even though she hadn't articulated it and didn't know what form it would take. Long summers on Lesbos, where she camped on the beach with hundreds of other lesbians, were no longer quite so enchanting after 7 consecutive years. European city breaks were okay, but hardly fulfilling. She'd been to Guyana a couple of times and knew she couldn't really live there easily as an out lesbian. And she wasn't interested in teaching English as a second language somewhere abroad, a popular option with other 20-somethings. And then Planet Venus beamed Nazinga down at her at Victoria Station to give her the great love that changes everything. That first week at Spirit Moon, they were invited to a buffet at the house of Gaia, who owned the estate and bequeathed it to the trustees in her will to ensure it remained women's land in perpetuity. Her home was a sprawling ranch house with vaulted ceilings, patchwork throws, curvilinear sculptures of female bodies, pottery vases, bucolic paintings and tapestry wall hangings Gaia had made herself. There were no images of any men, anywhere. They poured outside to enjoy the warm night, the lawn lit by flaming torches stalked into the ground. The clear soprano of Joan Baez, mournful alto of Joni Mitchell, and the richer, melodious contraltos of Joan Armatrading and Tracy Chapman emanated from the deck of the record player on the veranda. Dominique heard crickets, the distant sounds of owls, the hum of women enjoying each other's company. She was fascinated and felt like a time traveller who'd voyaged into a quite magical alternate society. The women's faces were tanned, healthy, seemingly untroubled, as if they were at ease with themselves and each other. All this happiness felt weird to Dominique as she moved among this group of strangers who greeted her with genuine enthusiasm. Was this a cult? She was used to cool Londoners who checked you out with a critical eye before deciding if you were worthy of their time and conversation. Gaia's grey hair was whipped into a bun. Others wore plaits or crew cuts. A couple of the black women favoured the simplicity of cornrows. They wore jeans and slacks, t-shirts and baggy shirts, gilets or waistcoats, jumpsuits and baggy dresses. Nobody wore makeup or high heels. They brewed their own beer, had a vineyard. A few smoked cigarettes and marijuana. Dominique longed for a relaxing draw, but she promised Nazinga she was done with it, agreeing that a poisoned body was a sign of a poisoned mind. The women who lived in the community came from every profession, as well as former housewives. They were craftswomen, chefs, teachers, farmers, shopkeepers, musicians. Many were retired. Dominique was curious to know more. Gaia told her she'd been through the wars for social and legislative acceptance in the 50s and 60s, eventually deciding to turn her back on men. She was done with the patriarchy. When she inherited her parents' Long Island mansion, she bought this farm. Did she miss men? Never. The women of Spirit Moon try to live in harmony. Even when arguments break out, we have a talking circle and try to sort it out. Women can also choose to live hundreds of acres apart until things cool down. A feud might take years to heal. In time, there's forgiveness, even if scars remain. Occasionally, a resident is forced to leave over unsanctionable behaviour, such as violence or theft. If a woman goes straight and wants relationships with men, she has to leave. If she's celibate, she can stay. Once we had a woman who turned and was caught sneaking men onto the property at night. She had to go. Dominique said the women seemed very laid back, not the ball breakers of her imagination, although there was nothing wrong with ball breakers. She'd even been accused of it herself. There's no need to be breaking balls here, Dominique. What a pretty name you have. Because there are no men here, which is why we come across as serene to you. We can just be ourselves, reclaiming the feminine divine, connecting to and protecting Mother Earth, sharing our resources, making decisions communally but maintaining our privacy and autonomy, self-healing the female body and psyche with yoga, martial arts, walking, running, meditation, spiritual practice, whatever works for each one of us. Dominique chatted freely, moving at ease between the women, as fascinated with them as they were with her, a black British woman, a rarity in these parts, they commented, visibly appraising her favourably. She was used to that and enjoyed it. Nazinga stayed in her seat on the veranda all night, grim-faced. People approached her warily as a result. Whenever Dominique looked over, she noticed Nazinga monitoring her every movement, although it didn't stop her mingling, enjoying a conversation with a stunning Native American woman called Esther, who wore a figure-hugging jumpsuit, who taught Ashtanga yoga to women in town, who hoped Dominique would come to her 65th birthday party. I'd love to, Dominique replied, complimenting Esther on looking so great for her age, just as Nazinga unexpectedly tapped her on the shoulder. We have to go. Really? They walked back to their house in the dark on paths that cut through the fields either side of them. Nazinga beamed the torch ahead. Dominique felt happily removed from her customary life in London in this quite special place. Was she going to go all hippy-dippy too? Nazinga was quiet for a while, then declared, "It's better if we don't socialise anymore. Once is enough. I'm here to be with you, not them. And I can only take so much of the fake friendship of white women and their flunkies. If they invite you to their talking circles, say no. It's a ruse to find out your private business and use it against you at a later date. Remember, we're here to work. It'll only mess things up if we blur the boundaries, and trust me, don't believe all that Mother Earth bullshit. I've been around long enough with these women's communities to know these witches are as malevolent as any person out there." "Why are we here if you're so critical of them?" Dominique asked. "Because I don't want to live in a man's world." They continued talking and walking, feet crunching on stony ground. "With me, you're safe," Nazinga said, although Dominique wasn't feeling particularly unsafe. "With me, you're complete," although Dominique wasn't feeling incomplete. "With me, you're home, because home is a person and not a place." Nazinga said she'd been thinking about renaming Dominique as Sojourner, a feminist rebaptism after Sojourner Truth, the anti-slavery activist, proceeding to deliver a potted history, although Dominique knew exactly who the legendary abolitionist was, as every self-respecting black feminist did, and said so. She still got the lecture. "It will be a feminist awakening of your new self," Nazinga explained, having a name more appropriate than a feminized Dominic. "I like my name." "So keep it. I'll call you Sojourner anyway, darling." Dominique decided Nazinga could call her what she liked. She wasn't going to answer to bloody Sojourner or any other name. Nazinga was showing signs of being a bit odd. Perhaps Amma was right when she warned her, "Don't go to America with that woman, Dom. You'll regret it." The veranda light of their log cabin emerged out of the darkness. Nazinga said the dark wasn't something to be feared when staying on land occupied only by women. Dominique thought rapists and serial killers didn't need to be brain surgeons to surmount a high fence to get to their prey. They lit candles in the bedroom, made love. Nazinga said it was how they shared their deepest connection. Dominique agreed to that. Sex with Nazinga was a wholly enjoyable experience in that Nazinga mainly serviced her, which she discovered she liked, as opposed to the more egalitarian actualities of her sexual past, which now seemed unfulfilling, although not at the time. As they lay awake afterwards in each other's arms, Dominique did feel complete, or at least more complete. Nazinga stared up at the low beams of the timber ceiling and told Dominique she'd earned the right to hear more about her life, starting with Roz, her first partner. Now it was clear they were going to spend the rest of their lives together. Dominique thought that was premature. A lifetime was a vast distance into the unknowable future. When you're still only in your 20s. It's early days yet, Nazinga, she wanted to say. It was on women's land in Oregon where Nazinga met Roz, who she thought was the love of her life, an older white woman who showed her that women were much happier without men. Roz was a builder of everything from garden sheds to tree houses to cabins to large houses and barns. Nazinga was apprenticed to her. For the first few years she felt cherished, blessed. It was a pretty idyllic existence, working together during the day, loving together at night, until she discovered Roz was a lapsed alcoholic who kept it secret. It came out when Nazinga found Roz's secret stash of gin, which she was working her way through while Nazinga slept. After the first confrontation, nothing Nazinga could do was right. They fought, first verbally, then physically. Ornaments were smashed, furniture upturned, curtains ripped off, window panes cracked. One night Roz was rushed to hospital, a broken bone, minor head contusions. Concussion? Oh, I don't know. Nothing major, nothing life-threatening. The all-white, of course, women's community blamed Nazinga, said they'd had enough and it was time for her to go, which was deeply unfair. She was callously evicted, packed her belongings into a single rucksack, was escorted to the gates and ejected into the outside world. It took her years to get over the injustice of it. Nazinga hit the road, hired herself out to women's communities on the eastern seaboard, recovered emotionally, had a couple of relationships that ended badly when people revealed their true selves, decided to go searching for a true soul sister, which took years. I had to travel all the way to London to find her. You, Sojourner. Nazinga turned to face Dominique, pillow to pillow, cupped her cheeks in her large, strong hands. Now that I've opened up to you, let's agree not to keep any secrets between us from now on. I want to know everything about you, and you will know everything about me. Agree? Dominique nodded, aware, however, that turning her head from side to side was practically impossible because it was held in the iron clamp of Nazinga's hands, no longer just warm and romantic, but mechanical. Do you still love me? More than ever, Dominique replied honestly, even more admiring of Nazinga for her honesty and strength in surmounting such trials. She was grateful that such a woman had chosen her, or rather, as Nazinga said, love chose them. End of part 3 of that bit of chapter 1. There's many parts. Ooh, I'm worried for Dominique. I'm not into this Nazinga person too much. Sounds like she's been through stuff and she's a bit intense and controlling. It's not good, is it? No one wants that. Anyway, loving it. It's moving from place to place. It's very informative as well. And yeah, I had no idea it was going to be like that. I didn't even read the back of the book. What does the back say? Passionate, razor sharp, brimming, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Anyway, thanks so much for watching or listening. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish this first chapter, which is about a quarter of the book. And then my friend suggested reading a self-help book, and but like not a really preachy one, more of a kind of fun one, to give us some motivation during winter. I think that could be quite fun. But I've got to find the right book. I've got to find one that's not preachy. I don't want to read like Eckhart Tolle or something to you guys, but something that's like, come on, things are difficult, but we can do it anyway. I think that could be fun. But yeah, anyway, I'll be back again tomorrow at 7:45. Oh, you're welcome, Chris. Who else has been here? Sam's been here. It's Friday, isn't it? Nothing happening, nothing exciting happening on our Friday evening. I think I'm just going to watch a film and have another early night. There you go. Anyway, no matter how difficult we might find moments, I'm sending you big hugs, lots of love, lots of positivity, which deep down there somewhere there is some. So yeah, sharing that with you, and I hope that you're doing okay. Yes, team early night on a Friday night, I think, for me. Anyway, I hope you're all well, and if you're not well right now, I hope you're okay, and I hope you get better soon. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow, 7:45. Bye.